Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of the Nonprofit Technology Conference, NTC 15, Day 2. We're at Austin, Texas in the Convention Center. My guest is Norman Reiss. He's Project Manager for Technology at the Center for Court Innovation. Norman, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's good to have you first time. Your topic is winning 100% buy-in from staff and board for your next nonprofit technology adoption. That's a real narrow niche, but critical. If we've decided that we need new software, and we've gone through the due diligence and the process of identifying the right new software for us, whether it's CRM or accounting or combined, now we need everybody to agree with us. Where do we start?
I think sometimes when you pick out a new system, there's somehow this assumption that the board and the management are all behind it. And in reality, that's not always the case. Or even if it is the case, things can change once a project is planned or once a project gets started. So it really has to be something that's a continuing effort, that even if you take the time and you get people on board at the beginning and they fully support you.
Yeah, and they've been with you through the process.
Yeah, to really check in with them while the process is going on and make sure that they haven't been diverted by other things, or that as new people come in to management or to the board, that they don't suddenly have a change of heart. So it's really kind of crucial to make sure that a system actually is going to have the result that you're hoping for when you first select it.
Yeah. All right. So we can have sometimes turncoats. They've been with us through the process, and now they're abandoning. They get nervous, or they feel we made the wrong decision. We made a mistake somewhere in the process.
There's so many things that can get in the way. I mean, even people with the best intentions, something just comes in that distracts them, or they have a friend that tells them about a different solution or a different path.
Yes.
So it's really
the well-intentioned friend.
Yeah, I mean, it's really as a technologist, it's really critical to build those relationships with management and with the board all the time, even before the project is even envisioned. And if you haven't done that, if you're operating in kind of a silo, then sooner or later that's gonna hurt you, because you need to work. You need to partner with these people especially when you're bringing in a new software platform, a new system.
They have veto power.
Absolutely, and they can do that at any time.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, the friend. My friend was just telling me about something we didn't look at. All right, so. The importance of relationships, even when you don't need their buy-in, the people's buy-in, but always working together collaboratively, just day to day.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. But let's speed ahead to the process now. Like I said as I set it up, we've chosen something, and they've been part of the process. Now we're talking about staff. We're talking about senior staff and board. Getting buy-in from both.
It's really about working with staff that are going to be using the system, as well as management, as well as it's really across the board. Because if you get the management and the board to buy in, but the staff don't feel like they're included, they're not going to cooperate, and then they may not use the system once it's rolled out. If you get the staff, but you don't get the management and the board, then you won't have the support you need to have a successable implementation.
You're not going to get the rollout.
So you have to go both ways.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you for straightening me out. All right. How do we start this? Well, assuming we've had these good relationships all along, but now there's some defectors, or where's the best way to start the topic together?
I think probably just the initial stages when you're first envisioning that you need something new, whether it's a replacement for something you already have or something entirely new that you're imagining for your organization. You really need to you need to be in communication with everyone about why you're doing this, because what's obvious to you is probably not obvious to other people, even though it may seem logical and a natural evolution. It really needs to be talked through, and different people have different ways of absorbing information. You can't just send out an email to the staff and say, this is what we're doing. You have to really take the time to seek out people, sometimes one-on-one, and explain why not only is this good for the organization, but how is this new system going to make their lives easier? Why should they bother? I mean, nobody I mean, I shouldn't say nobody, but most people have problems with change, and everybody kind of gets used to even bad systems because they know, they know what it's like. They know how to work around things that don't work, and even though you're introducing something that seems to be a clear win for the organization, not everybody has that wider focus. Some people are just focused on their own responsibilities and their own position, and some people may see this as a threat because a new system may mean that some people's jobs change, what they need to do during the day evolves.
Their routines are going to change.
Yeah, and some people will see that as an opportunity. Other people will see that as a threat. And you will have people that will try to take it down. And if you don't try to deal with that as early as you can, it's just going to backfire down the road.
Okay. All right. So we're explaining why and certainly including them in the process, right? Should people from all levels? I mean, maybe this is obvious, but be part of the committee that is making the decision and getting the different presentations from all the different potential vendors. Should there be stakeholders from all?
Well,
or
I
no?
mean, the reality is that it's hard to have everyone at every meeting because people don't have time. Large meetings can get a little unruly, but you have to give people the opportunity to be involved.
All right.
And some people will take it, and some people will say they're too busy, or they'll send a representative. But you have to find a way to make people feel like they're part of the process. If they feel like this system is being imposed upon them,
Yeah.
or that it's being chosen by someone else who doesn't fully understand their needs, then they're not going to be supportive. So it's kind of a fine balance between not having too many, but really seeking out beyond the obvious people that are going to be directly using the application, but anyone who might want to get data from the application, who might want to get a report from it. It's usually, and as a project manager, I sort of know you have to really seek out stakeholders far and beyond what you initially think, because people outside the organization are going to be affected by this too, and they need to have a say in this as well.
Okay. So at a minimum, you're keeping all the stakeholders apprised of maybe milestones in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And especially reliance on email only, which seems to be what a lot of people do now. I mean,
that's kind of shallow for this.
You
right?
have to,
Isn't it?
and especially people who are at different locations, you may have to go out there and actually sit down with them, or just invite them out for a lunch and talk about what's going on. Because the email, I mean, I've seen the email reliance in my office where people sit 100 feet away from each other and they hardly ever talk to each other, and that's not a good practice when you're trying to win people's support for a new project.
Yes, and needing them to feel a part of the process.
Yeah, and
email is kind of shallow.
Yeah,
for
and
that.
you're not getting any. You don't see the facial expression. You don't hear the tone of voice. You don't really know. I mean, they may be saying one thing and actually feeling something entirely different.
Okay. All right. What else? What other advice do you have? Strategies do you have for getting this critical buy-in? Anything specific to the board that might not apply for staff? Anything special there?
Well, every nonprofit is a little different as far as how the board works. Sometimes the board will work only with the ED, and sometimes the board has more relationships with staff. But I think you just need to be aware that the board is operating as an aid to management. And sometimes they will want to be actively involved. Sometimes they will have a more surface involvement. But there's just an awareness that they do have a role in this, and that if you ignore them, suddenly at one point a board member will come in and maybe drive the project in another direction because you haven't taken the time to apprise them of what's going on. So I think just an awareness that they may not be in your field of vision because you don't work with them at your office, or you don't work with them on a day-to-day basis, but they have to be part of the team.
Yeah, it could be easy derailment from a board member. The way
it happens
you were
all the
describing.
time.
Yeah. You have some bad stories about that? Personal experiences?
Well, I mean, I've worked in organizations where the board dealt mainly with the ED, and the staff really weren't even aware of things that were happening, and it didn't seem to make sense. And until we actually found out what was going on with the board and with the ED, And sometimes you're in an organization that's more transparent than others, where your ED will communicate well about what's actually happening. In other cases, things will be happening that you just have no awareness of, and suddenly things are going in a new direction, and you have no idea why.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of just taking the time, especially in a technology role, which is what I do in my organization. You really need to go beyond the tech group and make sure that you're talking with other organizations. The other thing I'll also, just as a precaution, is that something that happened to me in the last year. You have to be really aware of your boss's position in this whole scheme of things, because you can't be viewed as somebody who's going around your boss, or you're trying to have a relationship with a board member and he's not, or she is not, aware of it. So you have to be respectful of who you're working for, but on the other hand, you also have to make sure that you have relationships with people other than your boss, because your boss could leave tomorrow, and then your future with the organization will depend on those other relationships you've built or not.
You're doing another workshop at NTC on getting people to actually use the technology that is adopted, and
Yes.
it flows perfectly from this. So let's spend the next the rest of we have about another 10 minutes or so together. It's about half our time. It's perfect. Talking about getting people to use it so now we're past the decision stage and it's implemented. Is that where we are now? And
Yeah, I
right.
mean, and this I'm really going by my own experience. I've been in my current role for almost 4 years now, and I've had a couple of situations where we rolled out systems that we thought everything went as expected, and we checked in with the users later on, and we found out that they had gone back to their old systems, or they were going back to Excel, and
that's really
it's really
disappointing.
It's really, I mean, I found that you can have the best technical solution, which seems to make perfect sense, and it's a good future path for the organization, but because people don't feel like there's nothing in it for them, that they just. And the other thing is that if you don't take the time to actually be on site with people, and again, this goes back to what I was saying before about over-reliance on email. If you have different sites that are going to use the system, as most organizations do now, you have to actually go over there and talk to people. And sometimes people will say different things in one-on-one than what they'll say in a group. So you just can't, just hold a meeting and just invite everybody and say, okay, what do you think? You're going to have to go over and actually sit with people and watch and talk to them at their desk. You may need to get them out of the office where they feel safer to talk without people overhearing a conversation and saying, well, what's really going on here? Because it's really a shame to go through the process of vendor selection and months of implementation.
A lot of organization money and time has been devoted
and then,
to that process.
And then 3 to 6 months later, you're in the same position again. You're back using the old system. So if, again, I mean, this sort of goes back to what we were talking about before. If people haven't bought into the whole idea of why they're doing this, and not only that, is that people need to get training on an ongoing basis. You can't just go in the day after you roll out a system and say, okay, we're going to train you for the next week, and then disappear. You need to be on site on a regular basis, because people move around, they leave, and new people come in, or people forget. And you can say, oh, I gave them documentation, but we know nobody's going to really read that stuff. So you need to really probably plan a chunk of time after the rollout to be on site, working through problems, because no matter how much you plan, always things come up that need to be worked through. And if you take the time to plan for that, and you don't just immediately say, okay, I'm off on another project now, and good luck to you, and you need to take some responsibility for that. I mean, it doesn't happen by itself.
All right. What we still have plenty of time together. What else in the use of the technology? Other strategies, tips you have for ensuring it's going to be used? What else can we say about that?
Just in the conversations I've had with some other people since I got here this week here in Austin, you need to take the time to really go through the business processes that you're trying to deal with in this system.
Earlier in the selection and understanding process.
At the time that you're really thinking about. Let's say you've either picked the system or you're at the final stages. You need to really understand what you're trying to achieve and what the workflow looks like in the organization. And it's very hard to know that. And the other tip.
Does that mean? Well, before we get to another tip, hold on. You're brimming with tips, but wait. Let's dive into this one. Does that mean spending time with them, watching them in their processes?
Well,
Sitting side by side, maybe for
you
some
probably
time, or-
want to do that, because what I found is that there are some situations where I would talk to the manager of a group, and she or he would tell me that they need certain things,
Yeah.
and then I find out later that the actual people who were sitting at the computers doing the data entry, they really don't do things the way that the manager thinks they do.
Oh,
So then I get
yes.
involved in between the staff and the manager, and that can be a tricky situation as well. But it's better off to find that out early and to get try to get your staff on the same page than to roll out a system based on what a manager tells you, only to find out that the staff that work for that manager actually have a whole different view of what they'd like to really have in a system.
Yeah. So the end user, the actual
Yeah.
hands-on keyboards, those are the people you want to be talking to and maybe even observing.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if you could spend some time just shadowing them as they go through their day,
Yeah,
then that'll kind of really tell you what's really happening. Because it's one thing to talk through it; it's another thing to actually spend a week or spend a couple of days at a site and see what people are dealing with, and see how. One of the other things that I found out is that there's sometimes other systems in the mix that people are dealing with. So I rolled out a system about a year ago that people weren't using, and I found out later that there was a whole other system that they were required to use because of a grant that we had. The grant required them to put data in this other place.
And you had no idea.
I had no
Yeah.
idea. I mean, nobody mentioned it, and
Yeah.
it didn't occur to me, to ask that question. But now when I'm doing a new project, I always make sure to ask, what other systems do you maintain? And sometimes those other systems may be paper too. I mean, surprisingly enough, there are a lot of people who don't want to give up the traditional tools, and sometimes what works fine with a small system will not work fine as it grows, and that's just the growing pain sometimes of an organization that wants to really centralize data. And again, what's obvious to a tech team that's looking at all the sexy things that are available now, a lot of people don't feel that way who are back on the ground. So you really need to respect where they are.
You had another tip that you were gonna throw out, and I made us dive into the one about the end users, probing the end users more. What else were you gonna say?
Well, there's one actually thing I included in my blog. I have a blog that I've had for several years now at Nonprofit Bridge, where I talk about technology and communications and fundraising. And something I blogged about recently was that we were working with a vendor that wasn't quite getting what we needed. So we literally just took screens and we annotated them, and we showed them and said, this is exactly what we want. And sometimes you actually need to use graphics and visuals to show, and it also helps you kind of work through the process of how the workflow is. So really giving that kind of documentation to a consultant or a vendor or anybody who's helping you implement a new system can really help them understand, because you can't expect someone who comes into and works with you for 2 or 3 months on an implementation to fully get what your organization is about. So it's really your responsibility to educate them on, this is what we need and this is how we need to do it. And the same way that you need to over-communicate with staff to make sure that you deal with people who like to absorb information in different ways, you need to make sure that your vendor or consultant really understands your business needs and how your business works. And whatever that method is, whether it's extensive conversation or you need to diagram it, but it's really not the vendor's responsibility to get it. It's your responsibility to know your business well enough that you can explain it to someone and have them really, really understand it.
Okay, we have just like a minute and a half left. Anything? Well, I'm sure there is. So throw out some more. Whether it's getting the buy-in or getting the users to use the new technology. Share some more.
Well, one thing I would definitely advise people, if you're not already part of this NTEN community, this is the place to be, because very often when you get wrapped up in a project and you only see things in the vision of your own organization, you need to talk to other people from other places that are doing similar things that you are.
Yeah.
And just being here for 3 days and just having conversations with people and how are they dealing with similar situations, approaches that you may not have thought of on your own. You need to really be in the community, and the great thing about being here at NTC is that you actually can see people and have the conversation. I mean, you can't do everything on social media and on email. You need to sometimes just pick up the phone and talk to someone, and this is a great environment. And if anyone who's out there who's not taking advantage of this community, especially smaller nonprofits that don't have a lot of resources.
Right. Important to know, it's not only for technologists.
Absolutely not.
NTEN is not only for.
In fact, one of the reasons I like NTEN is that it's not. And it's sort of like the way my blog covers communications and fundraising. If you look at the sessions that we have at NTC, they cover a wide gamut for people who do different roles in a nonprofit. So there's something here for everyone, and I would really recommend that if you're not here at NTC this year, there's a lot of other ways to be involved in the NTEN world.
Yeah, they're very active online.
And it's very, and I've been a member for years. It's very rewarding.
Excellent. Good shout out to NTEN, our hosts, NTEN. And they're at nten.org, NTEN. And yeah, as well as the online, they have a lot of, there are meetups throughout the country. Small groups meeting, lots of places. All right.
Absolutely.
It's cool. Thanks, Norm. We're going to leave it there. All right?
Okay. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Good to have you. Norman Reiss, Project Manager in Technology for the Center for Court Innovation. And this is Tony Martignetti, nonprofit radio coverage of NTEN's NTC, the Nonprofit Technology Conference 2015. Thank you so much for being with us.